Okay, so in this video what we're going to be doing is building a shelf basically. So rather than have things hanging off the wall, screwed into the wall, suction cups onto the wall, the idea is you can build a shelf that's inset in the wall. It's called a niche, and instead of having a shelf coming out, it's going in the wall. So what we're going to be doing is basically creating a shelf in this general space. So I'm looking probably somewhere like this, probably around there, and in that I've got a few timbers I need to cut through, get for the plasterboard, create my shelf with the correct approach, and then add all the materials back in. So I'll take it step by step. There is a good few videos on YouTube around building niches. One of the products I'll be finishing with is a product called a wedi board. That's my waterproof membrane. There's a few steps before that, but if you use to search on YouTube for wedi board niche, you'll find plenty of videos. So this is a bit of woodwork, and then finishing off with the waterproof material afterwards. What I might do in between as well is, because I'm going to be using the actual plasterboard and it's not waterproof or water resistant plasterboard, I'll probably paint a membrane on afterwards before I then put any waterproof materials on top of that. But I'll take you through those steps when I get to it. One of the best videos I saw for this whole process, certainly for the structural element of it, was DIY Renovation. I'll put a link in the bottom of the videos. And in there he talks about creating your space, reinforcing where it's needed, but most importantly, at that first step, making sure you get the correct fall so water runs off, versus trying to do it at a later stage with tiles. So, tools for the job then, really basic tools. We need some writing, some measuring, levels. I've got a couple so I can get into the space. And then lastly, just something to cut. So I've got my oscillating saw, which is a really good go-to. Not that straight though, and I want to reuse the plasterboard because I'll be adding it back in. So I've also got my sort of small plunge saw as well, so give me nice straight cuts. So I'm going to crack on. First thing I'll be doing is measuring the space. I know I've got my floor built up over here. I know I've got my shower tray, which I think is around 22mm. I'll double check. And then on top of that, the tiles, which I haven't quite set on the tiles yet, but it's going to be at least 10mm. So add on 10mm, a few mil of adhesive underneath. So we're going to be fairly, good few centimetres off the current floor that I'm on at the moment. So I'll be able to work out roughly what height I need to be. Important to mention, this is going to be a bathroom and a shower for the kids, so I'll put the shelf up here because none of them will reach it until they're like 10 years old or something. So it's probably going to be in and around this space, on the basis it's going to be accessible for people of the smaller ages, to which the age range is 0 to 8 at the moment. So first thing I'm going to do is measure up. I'll take you to the next step and I'll see. Right, got my hole. I've had to cut it a little bit wider so I can pick up on the timbers either end. It's actually going to be a bit narrower than that. And then I have to make some adjustments as well. So I've cut the size that I want, but that doesn't make sense because I actually need to account for the extra 30–40mm of wood, plasterboard, tile backer. So I'm going to have to make it a little bit bigger rather than make it too high, and bring it down a little bit further. So probably, this is about 60mm or so, I'll probably bring it down to there. That way when I re-add on all my layers, I'll get back up to this level. So I'm just going to reinforce this now, take this off, keep this one as is actually, that's okay height, and then I'll reinforce all this, and then I'll probably leave it there and pick it up again tomorrow. So I had to extend the gap, I mentioned it in the previous clip. I've extended it now and I've reinforced it. I mean, didn't need an awful lot of reinforcement, this wasn't a supporting wall or anything like that. And the niche itself isn't really going to be having much weight on it. But I've replaced all the timber behind. I've got a support over here, the length across, and then this space here is where the niche should be. So I had to adjust it slightly so it's not quite the sort of 1000mm as it was going to be. It's slightly in, maybe 960, somewhere around there. So not too much smaller, but this piece is going to stick out because I had another piece of wood on the other side of this. I had to adjust. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to lay plasterboard on the surfaces of the wood. Now, I think I've seen some other ones where they've gone straight onto the wood with the tile backer. The reason why I'm going to go plasterboard on top of the wood is because the one video which I will put below, Renovation, DIY Renovation I think it was, I suggested that putting the tile backer, which doesn't have any flex, straight onto the wood might be prone to a potential crack in the future. So it'll be better to put it to the plasterboard, which will have a slight bit of flex. We're talking, you know, less than millimeters. And then what I'll do is waterproof that whole space. So I've got the offcuts of plasterboard. I'll use those or I'll get some new ones. Cover all the faces of wood. This is the other wall. This is the hallway wall here. Not going to worry about that. And what I will do though, where I've got the gaps and the cracks and the bits where I was trying to get in there with a saw, which is the wrong size, I'll probably put some fiberglass tape, the same one you'd use for plasterboard joining in between joints and cracks and things like that, because that will also have a bit of flex in it. But I'll cover all that up. I'll cover this in plasterboard. I'll cover all the joints in the tape, and then once I've done that, I'll cover it all in a waterproof membrane, the same one I used when I was doing the chimney stack just here. And then I know that whole space is waterproof. Even then I'm going to be putting my waterproof layer on top of it. One other thing I did do is, from a measurement point of view, obviously we level across here, and then this space here, could do with a small really, but put an angle, it's just a slight angle away from the wall, likewise here as well. And then what that will allow for is, when I'm laying my next layers on top, I don't need to then consider the slope that I need to introduce on any of the other layers. So I know as soon as I get that tile backer board down, I can put it down solid to this, and then I know that if the tiles fail and the grate fails, which inevitable is probably going to happen at some point, it doesn't matter so much because there'll be multiple layers of waterproofing, and the layer that really matters is going to be the tile backer, which is going to be flush with all of this. So I'm going to move on to the next bit now. As I say, cover it in plasterboard, these pieces, and then I'll put the fiberglass tape on, and then I'll be in a ready position to start painting the membrane. Right, see you in a bit. Right, just a quick update here. So previous one I built the frame out and then I needed to plaster it. So it looks like a bit of a Frankenstein scenario at the moment, but ultimately I've covered it all in plasterboard, minus the back because it's already plasterboard. And there is a reason or logic for that. It's one of the videos I watched from the DIY renovation, which again I'll put a link in. Suggested that if you was to put the tile backer straight onto the wood, then as the wood contracts, expands, which it might do that over time anyway, there's a better chance of it cracking. So instead, putting plasterboard on, which will have a little bit of flex in, will allow for that contraction and expansion, just, you know, to a micro millimetre sort of thing. So that's in. They're not waterproof ones though, they're not damp proof plasterboard, but that's okay, because now what I'm going to do, I've covered this all up in this reinforcement tape you'd use for plastering normally. The idea being this covers up the crack, so should flex a little bit as well. And then now, if you recall, on the chimney stack over here, I used a product called Hydroban. Again, there's multiple versions of this, but ultimately what I'll do now is paint this whole space, and then this will be fully waterproof. So in theory, not that I'm going to, in theory I could then tile onto it instead of putting the tile backer board onto it. But I am going to put a tile backer board onto it just because this whole space will be covered in tile backer board. But what this will allow for, and this additional layer of the waterproof membrane, is will guarantee me that it's going to be waterproof, irrespective of what happens to the tiles when they fail, or even if I have an issue with the tile backing board, I haven't put it together properly, there's a crack in it or whatever it might be, it'll be fully waterproof. So I'm going to paint this now. If you recall, when the chimney, it is just a paint on. It does require 2 layers. I probably won't have enough time tonight for it to go off and then paint it, so I'll do layer tonight, layer in the morning before breakfast perhaps, and then that'll be this space finished. But yeah, I'm going to crack on with that now and I'll show you when it's painted up. Okay, that's me wrapping up for tonight at least. So I've got one decent layer, and you can't put it on too thick for the first application. So I've got one decent layer on, so you're beginning to see the niche take shape, I guess. See some of the scrim tape still showing through, but it's only a thin layer. That'll probably disappear in the second one. If not, I might need to give that bit a little bit of a third coat perhaps. But for the most part, I've got my first layer on. I'm going to leave that to go off overnight. You can already see, by the way, it going off, the sort of difference in colours. So when it's fresh on, it's quite light, and then when it goes off, it goes slightly darker, so you can just about see it there perhaps. So I'll leave this to go off overnight, then I'll give it another layer, which should hopefully do it. If not, maybe one more layer, and then I'm leaving that then until I do the tile backer, which will be when I do this whole space. I'd rather do all that job at the same time rather than faffing backwards and forwards. But for now, I'm going to wrap it up, call it a night, and I'll come back tomorrow to the last layer and then move on to the next job. Okay, so this is this job wrapping up now. I've got my second layer of the Hydroban on, the waterproof membrane. I've got a couple of small gaps, but it's actually sealed below. what I'll probably do is I'll be fully painting this wall with a membrane at some point. So I'll probably just add another layer on, or as and when I open the tub again. So where I'm at right now is this layer's on. The next thing I'll be doing in this space, but won't be immediately, we'll be adding in the tile backer. If you recall, the reason why I did the structural stuff at the beginning and the way I did it was when I had the tile backer boards on there, I don't need to think about any angles or degrees I need to put it on there. I can literally just lap it on flat, because right now I've got a nice little slope which will allow for the water to drain off down the line. So just to recap then, the steps that I went through. So essentially cut a hole in the wall, which is quite clear. I did have some timbers running up along where the rest of the stud wall was. But this was never a supporting wall. Obviously if it was, you'd be changing the scenario you were doing. So I was happily able to cut through, and then what I did do then is a bit of reinforcement. So I've got a 2x4 going across, 2x4 underneath, and then 2 2x4 sitting in between those, essentially recreating some of that support more than anything. The shelf itself doesn't need supporting, there's not going to be heavy things in there. But ultimately by doing that approach and cutting the whole gap, I was able to create, we're just shy of 1 metre now and I've added all the layers back in. But with that being in play, having 1 metre niche, it's not very deep, but 1 metre niche deep and wide is better than having these tacky shelves all over the place or shampoo bottles on the floor. This bathroom, as I mentioned before, is going to be for 4 people. So having enough shelf space was the goal of this versus some small ones. So just to recap on the other steps. So after cutting through, I then did the reinforcement of the timber. And the next step from there was to add in plasterboard. That isn't necessarily a requirement. I just picked up those notes on a video I watched, which was Home DIY Renovation. I think I got it wrong, but I will add the link in below of their channel and their video on this particular topic. But they suggested building the timber with the correct fall, which I've followed that process. Not every video you watch will actually say that, so I think that's a really important tip if you're going to do a niche. Make sure you allow for a little bit of fall, and don't allow for the tiles to give you that fall, because when the tiles fail, the grout or whatever else, then you're left with water pooling behind the tiles. So do it right at the offset, whether you're building the niche itself or you're going to be doing the structural thing like I've done here. So next was cutting the hole, create the hole, reinforced. Then I've added in plasterboard. Again, plasterboard, that wasn't really a requirement. You'll see a lot of videos which essentially just add on the tile backer board, which I think might have been okay. But this one snippet from this one video suggested that if you put the tile backer board onto the timber, when the timber moved, there'd be greater chance for the tile backer board to be moved. And the tile backer board has no flex. If it has no flex, it could crack. And rather than think about that long term, I thought, you know what, I'll add in some plasterboard. The only downside is the plasterboard I've added in wasn't a moisture resistant one. However, the premise of me adding in this waterproof layer at this point should mitigate against that, because ultimately that product could have been put all over these normal plasterboards and then I would have been fine from a waterproofing point of view. So after I put the plasterboard in, I then, because it was a bit of a mess really with the different cuts and things, I then used scrim tape to fill in all the gaps and the cracks, and that was because the product itself, the Hydroban product, can only go so many mils, and also by adding in the scrim tape, the stuff used for plasterboard, allows for a little bit of flex, so hopefully cracks don't form, which again, you know, we're going to be really minor for the most part. And then the last then was 2 layers of the Hydroban. As I said, I might have to do another tiny layer at some point just to fill in some of the gaps. But for the most part, you know, we're left with a metre wide, nearly, where are we? Nearly a foot or so high. I think a few centimetres shorter than that at the moment. But a good sized niche, which I will come back and use a tile backer and subsequent tile in a later video. So hopefully that's been useful. I mean, the project itself was probably a few hours worth in the end. I did a bit one night, a bit another night, finish off to the paint today. So not an awfully long one, but I think it will be very impactful in the bathroom when we do come to tile it. When I do come to tile it, we're sort of deciding on what we might do. We've got 2 different colours in the bathroom. Might be tacky, might not be, we're not sure. I might do the inside of it in a different colour and then be the frame of it in a different colour beading as well, like a bold colour or something, but I'll come to that at some point. But now that's done, I can start to move around the bathroom. In the next video, provided I do this in order, I'll be fitting the shower. So it's going to be a concealed shower unit, fully concealed shower unit. I've been advised not to do that by everyone, including plumbers. But I'm just going to go and do it and see what happens. And that will be in the next video. And then I'll gradually move my way around the bathroom, ticking off the rest of the jobs before I move onto the other half of the bathroom. So for now I'm going to wrap up. Hope that's been useful and I'll catch you in the next video. See you later.